Today, in honor of the best part of waking up, I'll be creating some kitschy, mid-mod Googie style kitchen decor with a coffee theme. Welcome to Up All Night DIY. I'm Monica. Thanks for joining me. I'm hosting the My Coffee House collaboration along with Dawn of Shabby Meets Bling, Natalie of Sparks of Joy Studio, and Mary of The Painted Peach. We're also joined by lots of other really creative and talented creators. You can expect all kinds of coffee projects, cafe signs, decorating with teacups, or maybe even just a recipe for their favorite coffee drink. You'll find links to Dawn, Natalie, and Mary's channels in the description box, along with the link to the playlist. Right, so let's pour ourselves a cup and fill it to the rim. We got a lot to do. Let's get into it. Our first project is this cool 3D coffee sign. I'll be using this 15x4 piece of scrap wood as the base for our coffee sign. First thing I'm going to do is apply a coat of black acrylic paint. And of course I'll do the sides as well. This is going to be a reverse stencil project. So I cut some vinyl lettering with my silhouette. Now, of course, if you don't have a silhouette or a Cricut or a vinyl cutter, you could always just do this with a stencil, or you could trace the letters on. There's a variety of ways. Before I had my silhouette, I used to actually trace letters onto the vinyl and then just use scissors to cut them out. That's a good option too. Okay, so now I'm going to apply my vinyl over top of the black paint, and you can see that I added a little circle there. That's about the same size as the coffee cup that we're going to make. It's just a space holder. Once I get this positioned, I'll burnish it into place. Now, I didn't bother to burnish down that circle because, again, that was really just for spacing's sake, so it's not necessary. Once I've removed the transfer tape, I'm going to add another coat of acrylic black paint over top of my lettering. This is going to keep the letters nice and crisp, and you can do this with Mod Podge too. You've seen me do that as well. So I'm just going to apply my paint over the letters first, and then I'll give the board a complete coat of black paint. And for my top coat, I've broken into my reserve of Tropic Bay blue, and I'm going to apply 2 coats. My first coat, I'm going to paint horizontally, and then for my second coat, I'll paint vertically. Now, of course, you don't have to do it this way, but I wanted this to have a vintage kind of look. So I thought by having the strokes going different directions, that would kind of add to the atmosphere. Once we get the second coat on, we're going to set this aside to dry. And we're going to work on our 3D cup. So for the cup, I'm going to use Little Model Magic. We're also going to need a 2.3 inch foam ball. I cut about, I want to say, a third of the top of it off, and then I cut it flat on the back. I used a long serrated knife to make the cut. I also cut a slice from that leftover foam so that I can make a little saucer. We're going to grab a handful of clay, knead it to condition it, and then we're going to roll it nice and flat. I used a jar lid to cut out a circle that was around the same size as the ball, maybe a wee bit bigger. This is really not necessary, and honestly, it didn't make that much of a difference. I thought it might cover the foam better. I don't know. Anyway, I rolled it out a little bit more, just to elongate it a wee bit. And then I just wrapped it over top of my foam piece and just pressed to make sure that it was well adhered to the foam. And I kind of rolled it on the table to smooth it out, but also really to make sure that the clay was really well stuck. I cut off any excess, and then I filled in any gaps with that excess clay. And I'm going to do my best to smooth out anywhere where I added additional clay. Now I'm going to add some clay to the back. I'm not too fussy with this. You're not going to see it, but I wanted clay on there because it'll be easier to glue it to the board if I have clay on the back. You feel me? I'm going to use a little bit more clay and cover that saucer piece. And once again, I'm pressing to make sure it's well adhered. I just want to make sure that the entire piece of styrofoam is covered with clay. I'll use a toothpick to anchor the saucer to the bottom of the cup. I really just want to make sure that the back of the cup and the back of the saucer are lined up perfectly. Once I get it aligned, I'll push that toothpick right up through the bottom of the saucer up into the cup. There we go. And of course, our cup's going to need a handle. To make the handle, I grabbed some clay, flattened it with my thumb, and I'm using a paint bottle cap as a cookie cutter to punch out that circle. That just happened to be the perfect size. And now I'm going to punch a hole in the center of that circle. There we go. And I'm just going to push that right onto the side of my cup, shaping it as I go. Using my clay tool here, I am going to incorporate the clay on the handle with the clay on the cup, just rolling over the seams. And now I'm going to set that aside to dry overnight. In the meantime, we're going to peel up the vinyl on our sign to reveal the letters. Looks good. And now with my 000 detail brush, I'm going to add a white highlight to the right of the letters. So I'm basically doing a little bit of an outline. I'm not completely outlining the letter. I'm being a little selective. Now, I do this a lot, so I just do it by eye. But if you're going to do this, it's always good to bring up a reference picture. There are loads of vintage signs that have both highlights and drop shadows, because we're going to do a drop shadow next. I'm using North Sea, which is a Ceramcoat color, for the drop shadow. And this time, we're going to do that to the left-hand side of the letter. And again, it's basically just an outline, but once again, I'm not outlining the entire letter. I'm being selective with that too. I'll continue along until all my letters are both highlighted and have drop shadow. To age the sign a wee bit, I'm going to dry brush along the edges with that North Sea. And once we complete that, that's pretty much all we can do for now because we have to wait for the coffee cup to dry. So we're going to jump ahead to DIY 2, which is this cool atomic coffee sign. I used Photoshop to create my design, so the first thing I did was manipulate an ellipse shape into this boomerang. And I added an outline. Then I added my text. Once I had the text in place, I added the coffee pot. And then I added the diamond pattern. And I printed this out on cardstock. I traced it onto some MDF, and then I cut it out with my scroll saw. I'll position my inner boomerang and trace around to give me an outline. I'm going to fill the center space in with Ceramcoat North Sea. I wind up changing this later, you'll see. I'll paint in the outline with just plain old white. I feel like every good retro sign has a quirky outline, and if you've seen my other retro pieces, you know I kind of lean that way every time I do a sign. I give this 2 coats of the white just to make sure that it's really nice and crisp. When I cut this out, I added a little tip at the top here where our A is going to kind of overflow into that area. So I'm going to paint that black. I also did a little section at the bottom. That's going to get a coat of black as well. I cut the coffee pot as a separate piece, and I'm going to give this 2 coats of Tropic Bay blue. Yeah, so this is the teal mint, and this is much more complementary to the Tropic Bay blue of the coffee pot. So what we're going to do now is position the coffee pot where I'm going to want it to go when this sign is complete. And this is so I know where to add my text. I just want to make sure that, the text isn't going to run into the coffee pot. You feel me? So I'm going to line up the top of the A with that overhanging black point. And we're just going to make sure that everything is in place, and I'll burnish this down. And now I'm going to add the rest of the word for coffee. And get that on there. There we go. I'll come in and add a drop shadow and a highlight to all my text. I'm going to use the North Sea for my drop shadow. I don't know if you can see this, but again, the drop shadow is going to be to the left of all the letters. Let's see, can you see that? I'm not so sure you can see it on camera. All the highlighting is in white, and it's to the right of the letters, just like before. I think the drop shadow and the highlighting makes all the difference, especially with the sign. I think it looks much more professional and much more authentic to the era. Okay, we're just going to finish this up real quick. I cut those diamond shapes out of vinyl as well, and we're going to get those in place on the coffee pot. You know I love my quasar stars. I always have those on hand. So we're going to add a couple of black ones to the coffee pot. And let's put one here. I think that looks good, if I can get it to stick. I'm going to add a highlight and a drop shadow to the black quasars, wait for the highlight, and I'm going to use the teal mint for the drop shadow. I'll add a stylized black outline to the pot. So again, it's not a complete outline. I'm just adding lines here and there. And you know what? While I'm at it, I'm going to add a black drop shadow to the white diamonds. Let's add some vinyl starbursts to this sign as well. I cut these out with my silhouette. I keep them on hand. I'm going to mark the position of where my pot will go when I glue it into place. But before I do that, I'm going to add some drop shadows to my starbursts. You know what? Let's add some white highlights to the pot too. Right, we're good to go. So I'm going to use some wood glue and attach the pot to the sign. Now I'm just going to make sure that my coffee pot is lined up with those marks. And once we get that into place, we'll let it set and I'll spray it with a coat of clear matte sealer. I love the way this turned out. Let me know what you think. Now for something a little more practical, a coffee and a tea tin. I gave these biscuit tins a coat of a metal primer spray paint. This primer will allow me to paint over top of it with acrylic paint, and I won't have to worry about it chipping or peeling or anything like that. So keeping with our color palette, I'm going to give both lids 2 coats of black acrylic paint. When we decided we were going to do this coffee theme, I thought, oh yeah, let's do some canisters. And I couldn't really find the kind of canisters I wanted. And then I remembered I had these biscuit tins, and I thought these were the perfect substitute. I love all those canister sets from the 50s and 60s. I just think they're so quaint, so I had to make me a set. Of course, we're going to use Tropic Bay blue for the main part of the canister, so this will get 2 coats as well. Generally speaking, when I paint something like this, I try to keep my strokes going in the same direction. I also try to use the largest brush that I have that will fit the space. That'll cut down on the brush stroke look. And for something like this, I want a smooth finish. Once the paint is dried, I'm going to spray these with clear matte sealer before I add my vinyl. I've cut out some quasars for the top, so I'm going to burnish them into place. And both lids have the same design. You can see I just made the quasars for the larger lid bigger. I wanted to keep them in proportion. I'm making sure that the seam of the can is in the back, and now I'm going to add my vinyl to the front of the tin. So the smaller one is for the tea. And I'm going to do my best to line this up nice and even, and we'll burnish it into place. It's coming off nice and easy. Good stuff. Got a little lift there, but that's okay. We'll just use our fingernail and get that into place. There we go. And now we'll do the coffee. Again, I'm centering it, making sure that the seam of the can is in the back. I'll burnish this into place, and then I'll add the quasars to the side. Now once again, we're going to come in and add some highlights and some drop shadow. I'm using Teal Mint for the drop shadow. And now we'll add the drop shadow to the tin. On the lids, I used white on the blue quasars for the highlight, and for the white quasars, I used Tropic Bay. And now we'll add the highlights to the tin. Now that all the painting's done, I'm going to give it another top coat of clear matte sealer. I think these are really cool. What do you think? Right, let's save our coffee cups dry so we can finish our first project. It's nice and dry and everything looks good, so I'm going to give this 2 coats of white paint. I won't bore you with that since you won't really be able to tell since it's white on white. You know what I'm saying? Now we need some creamy coffee for our cup, so I'm using a mix of, I think this was Mississippi Mud and Oyster Beige. They're both Americana colors, but as always, I'll have all my paints and all my supplies listed in the description box for you. That looks pretty good. Once it dries, we'll give it a second coat. Pulling out my Folk Art floating medium so we can do a little shading. The medium is this clear gel here. I'm going to get a healthy coat of that on my flat brush here. Just going to dip it in there, work it into the bristles. On the corner of my brush, I'm going to scoop up some of that Mississippi Mud. And I'm going to stroke it onto my plate. This is going to blend the medium with the paint on the bristles. And that allows the paint to fade from dark to light. So the darkest color is at the very corner of my brush, and it fades as it goes toward the middle of the bristles. So now I'm going to hold the pink corner of my brush where I want my darkest shadow, right along the edge here, and I'm just going to stroke right in there and add that shading. I'll reload my brush as needed. And I'm going to kind of feather that out a wee bit. There we go. And I'll load my brush the exact same way every time I use a different color. It's the same process. Now I'm going to shade the cup with Tropic Bay Blue. So again, I'm holding the pink corner of the brush where I want the darkest shadow. And I'm just going to float that color right along the edge and anywhere where I think it might look good. I'm going to add some here along the sides. Let's get a little on the handle and around the handle, and then we're going to do around the bottom of the cup and the top of the saucer. Yeah, I think I'm pretty happy with that. Let's add some white foam to the top of the coffee. Looks tasty. Good to the last drop. Let's dip that a couple of Mississippi Mud bubbles. And I'm going to add white highlights to those bubbles too. We'll add a couple of vinyl quasars to the cup, black in the center. And we'll add a turquoise quasar to either side. Now let's add some squiggly white lines to represent the steam or steamy cup of coffee. Just 3 quick wiggly lines. That'll do it. I also decided to pop some black quasars in the top left corner and the bottom right corner of the sign. So I'm going to highlight those and give those a drop shadow as well. To protect my clay, I'm going to pounce on some of this Decor Art multi-purpose sealer. I'm just going to use cosmetic sponge, as always, and pounce it on. I'm going to use some FabiFix Glue. It's the same as 3-in-1 glue to affix the cup to the sign. I want to make sure that I get it lined up with that steam. There we go. And to finish it off, I'll spray on a coat of clear matte sealer, and we're all done. Let's take a final look at today's projects, shall we? Here's the atomic coffee sign. Love the way this turned out. I think it's got a real googie feel to it. I love the colors and the whole vibe. Let me know what you think. I am digging the tints. Who needs to spend all that money on authentic mid-mod when you could do your own? And they're practical to boot. And finally, our 3D coffee sign. I love this one too. Originally, I was going to go with the boho thing, but then I thought, No. Let's go with mid-century. And I gotta say, I'm so happy I did. I do have a couple of videos that have a coffee theme. I'll link those below. One is even a Halloween one. I want to thank Dawn, Natalie, and Mary for hosting with me. You'll find links to their channels in the description box, along with a link to the playlist. Please watch everybody's videos, show them some love, give them a thumbs up. It really does help us out, and we truly appreciate it. I hope you like all of today's projects. Please let me know which is your favorite, if you have one. Please like, share, comment, and subscribe, and all that good stuff. Stay creative, my friends. Thanks for hanging with me. See you next time. Up all night with Monica.